What if you knew without a shadow of a doubt that no matter what happened, you were going to show up to yourself with open arms, a warm embrace that says, I love you. I'm so proud of you. Oh my God, you did your best. That's all that matters. We're going to figure this out. I've got you. We've got this. Don't worry about it. That's all it takes is a shift in knowing that there is only one person that you've got to please, and it's yourself, and you can make a different choice.
Let's link up with Krysta on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's going on, FYX listeners? Welcome back to our latest episode of the FYX podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and I have the perfect guest, and truly it is the perfect guest. We didn't even plan this. I recorded these two episodes back to back by sheer coincidence that just beautifully layers on to last week's conversation about healing, about doing the inner work, about being more connected to yourself. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy this one, particularly if you listened to last week's episode with my girl, Courtney. It is very rare that I ever encourage anybody to listen to any of the FYX episodes in order. And by no means do you have to listen to last week's episode to take something away from this one. I know you 100% will either way, but it was just kind of cool how divine timing stepped in and laid my schedule out so that I'd be able to feature these two incredible ladies back to back. And like I said at the beginning of this month, keeping in theme with Women's History Month, it's perfect. It's all just unfolding so greatly, and I love that. So today's guest's name is Alexis Artin, and Alexis is a female embodiment, a female empowerment coach, and she has developed this incredible practice, this incredible coaching method that she gets into in a lot of detail throughout this conversation. I'm not even going to try to condense it down into 30 seconds because there are beautiful layers and components and elements to it that she just does such a great job of explaining herself. And that company is called Soulsway. So I encourage everybody to check out her work beyond this episode, beyond listening to this conversation. And I just want to highlight one particular moment that Alexis talks about where she equates self-care to brushing your teeth. And it's so important and it needs to be said multiple times. So I'm kicking off this introduction by highlighting it. And also reminding you, the listener, that if you're not making space, if you're not making time for yourself, there are ways to get support in doing that, like working with coaching teams like the Fitness FYX. We really pride ourselves on teaching women how to put themselves at the top of the list. You don't want to just do it all. All of you ladies out there, and I know we do have some guys that listen to the show, but this one's really for the ladies. You are doing the most. And you are incredible at juggling so many things. And I see you and I respect you and I love the hustle and grind. But our new mantra for the Fitness FYX is not just doing it all, but doing this stuff better. Who cares about doing it all if you can't do it well? So this episode, this conversation is one more point in the bucket for doing it better. And if you really want to take it up to the next level, you really want to make 2024 your year where you stop just doing all of the things and actually doing them well by taking care of you, then apply for one-on-one coaching with the Fitness FYX and let's see if we're a fit. And with that, let's welcome Alexis to the FYX podcast. Alexis, welcome to the FYX podcast. I am so excited to have you here today and can't wait for the FYX listeners to learn more about you, your journey, your story, all the things. But before we get into it, I got to ask you my signature FYX question, which is, what's your go-to coffee order? What are you sipping on to get your day started? It looks like you have it right next to you.
I sure do. I have gotten into Life Boost coffee.
Oh, I'm not familiar. Tell me more about it.
Well, it is this like it's low acid and the way that it's like harvested is really clean and it's this amazing coffee. And I actually just finished cancer treatments, and during them I wasn't having coffee because my body just couldn't handle it. And so my gift to myself at the end of treatments was I bought myself a fancy coffee machine, a Jura coffee machine, and I make my Life Boost coffee in it. So there's your answer to your question, because I am a coffee addict.
I love it. So how have you noticed any differences in terms of like your digestion and things like that since you've switched to this kind of coffee?
It's just so I mean, as clean as coffee can be is what it feels like to me. I just am such a fan. I'm a purist in that way. And I love it.
I need to check it out. Are you a true coffee drinker in the sense of like, you'll take it black because you like it for the taste?
No.
No.
No. I mean, I do a keto program a lot. Okay. So heavy cream is usually a direct route for me, as well as a little bit of like stevia, maybe a flavored stevia.
Okay, cool. I'm a big almond milk latte kind of girl. So I do love coffee for the taste, but I don't drink it black. I get a lot of people on the show for, we'll say, calorie reasons who tend to drink it black, which is fair.
I have been there on like fasting days. I'll go black with some cinnamon in there. I mean, there's all kinds of options. Thank God.
Totally. Right. And you can make your own. And that's the best part about it. And that's your thing you look forward to in the morning. So I love that. Well, cool. Well, I'm going to take this in a totally different direction, and just knowing a little bit about your background and your story, I think we're going to go pretty deep right away. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say to this. But typically, most people hop on a podcast, and the first question that an interviewer will ask is, tell the listeners who you are. And that can launch us right into the whole resume spiel, what kind of coaching you do, who you work with, and all of those things are important. They're great, right? But I've found over the last 3 years of podcasting, there is a slightly different way to ask that really leads to a much more meaningful conversation. So for you, instead of sharing that information with us, instead of giving us the elevator pitch, so to speak, tell me who you are from the sense of why someone should care about what you have to say. Why should a person continue to listen to the rest of this podcast and your message versus the, let's be real, thousands of other podcasts they could go browse right in the second that they hit the play button?
Powerful question. And the quality of our life is based on our question. So well played. Yes. The very first thing that comes up to me when you ask me that question is a line from a Whitney Houston song, which is, I'm every woman.
Love that.
I have been the person who waited tables at Hooters and rode Greyhound buses. And I'm also the person that worked with A-list celebrities and traveled on private jets. A lot of my friends call me the Forrest Gump of the feminine, because I have done just about every job that there is. I have been the wife, and I have been the mother, and I have been the single girl, and I have been the woman that suffered postpartum depression, and I'm the one that beat cancer, and I'm the one that came back from crazy amounts of debt, and I'm the one that had so much plastic surgery because she was trying to carve herself into someone more lovable on the outside than she felt on the inside. And I'm the one who went to do all of the work to heal from that, from the inside out. I really have run the gamut of trying on all the aspects of a wild and crazy life to get to a place that is packed with wisdom and experience. Not that I have all the answers, I certainly don't, but I've lived into them.
Oh, that's so good. There's so many things I could ask you as a follow-up to that. First, you're my first person to ever answer with the song lyric, so that's really cool. But second, I want to go back to the very last two sentences that you just said, a specific 2 words of trying on. And trying on these different personas, roles, personalities, whatever you want to call them. Let's break that down a little more, because I think that's something that a lot of women can most definitely identify with. And I find that most of the women that I work with, and even along my own journey, there is this constant pressure to handle every responsibility at the same exact time. And that weight gets very heavy to the point where the thing that usually gets deprioritized in the situation that I'm working with them, in the capacity that I'm working with them in, is their health, is their fitness, is their nutrition. And you can only operate that way for so long. So how did you arrive at the words trying on? Because I do think that was intentional in the way that you phrased it.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote an ebook at one point about how to dress your soul for success. And it concept of, we are all always trying things on and then figuring out whether or not they're a real fit for our soul, for our purpose, right? But so often we don't dress for that reason. We don't dress for our soul's purpose. We dress for a role that we feel we need to take on in order to be, quote unquote, externally, the external gaze, successful, powerful, safe, beautiful, loved, whatever, rich, whatever it is, thin enough, right? Get more followers, blah, blah, blah. Rather than, does this really truly nourish me? Is this really truly why I'm here? And I feel like it is something that is innate to us ever since we're like little girls, right? We're trying on the am I a tomboy? Am I a girly girl? Am I a this? Am I a that? Right? Trying on these friend groups. And then, you mature a little bit and it's like, I'm trying on this identity. Am I emo? Am I this? Am I that? Right? Yeah. And do I like drinking? Do I not like drinking? What do I want to do now that I'm, going into school? Like, what do I like? What do I want to focus on? We're just constantly trying things on, trying on speaking our truth. Oh, that worked. That didn't work. Let me adopt and let me create a new belief system and try it this way. Let me try on how relationships, right? And I think the moral of that, to your point of self-care, slipping off the agenda, so often when we try on really adopting self-care into our lives, but there's all of these, which is, inwardly focused. There's so much external expectation and agenda on us that we're trying to keep up and we're trying to please and we're trying to perform, that it is very easy for the inside to slip out the back door.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it totally does. And I'd love to know for you at what point, because you obviously in broader strokes referenced a lot of the different versions of you that you've evolved into, but what were some of the tools you used or resources that you have found have worked for you to actually get in touch with yourself? Because I find that's the biggest question that people aren't even asking themselves, is like, who really am I? And creating the space to actually do that.
Well, the first thing that I would say is, in the coaching world, this is sort of 101, but it's a values assessment. And there are a lot of people that do values assessments and they do them in very different ways. The one that I have found to be the most valuable is one by Dr. John Demartini. I'm actually a facilitator of his method. I'm licensed in a lot of different things, and I don't get like any benefit to, I'm not sponsored in any way. But I really do think that is his values assessment, which is free. You just take it online, is the best one out there. It is the most accurate to getting you as clear as possible on what you truly value, not hijacking other people's values and being unconscious and unaware that you're doing it, but really getting to the root of, wait a second, what does my life demonstrate truly matters to me? And am I close to that in my pursuits, or am I pretty far away from it. And now what do I need to do to course correct to get even closer? Because that's the only pathway to fulfillment, is living into your inherent values. And if you're not in any way, shape, or form, then you're going to feel like there is a void that needs to be filled. And so often what we outsource or reach for to fill that void isn't usually what we're actually looking for. And we come up feeling even emptier.
Yeah. Can you walk us through a time that when you look back on all the different career paths and roles that you've played and had, that you kind of had that like, holy shit, I don't know if I'm living in alignment with this person that I want to be, with the values that I have, and what you did as a result of that?
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I've had a lot of those moments.
And I think that's important for people to hear, right?
Yeah.
I really, just the fact that you introduced your response to this question by saying I've had so many, I want the listener to know that it's okay to have these different evolutions. And I think I just did a podcast on this with another friend last week, because we are wired in a way that's pretty resistant to change. People don't like to hear that. And that's part of the human experience, though.
Right. I mean, our animal bodies are wired to avoid unfamiliar, uncomfortable, potentially threatening things. Right. So that tracks. I would say the first one that comes up to me, as I like think back on it, the first thing that populates in the search for that information, is I worked in the entertainment industry. And I worked at the upper echelon of it for a decade. And it was at the very tail end of my tenure in that industry. And I was working for a household name at the time, who, this was pre the Me Too era.
Okay.
And he was engaging in some Me Too behavior. And there was, and not towards me, by the way, but I was privy to
witnessing it. Yeah.
And there was one particular incident that it just had gone too far for me. And as luck would have it, I was currently working full-time there, but also I was doing a full-time training at a female embodiment and empowerment company to become a teacher. Wow. And I was bouncing like a ping pong ball back and forth between misogyny and female empowerment. Right?
Yeah,
like
two polarities right there. Yeah.
The juxtaposition, like you can't make this stuff up. And it was also this sort of awareness of like, wow, the entertainment industry, the way that I've experienced it up until now, and especially in this moment, feels really soul sucking. And this female empowerment thing feels really soul fulfilling. And so even though I'm leaving, and everybody was like, are you crazy? Because after that incident, I quit. I said, I'm leaving the entertainment industry for good. And I'm going into this female empowerment thing. And I was losing so much power. I was losing so much influence, and I was losing so much money. And it was like, what are you doing? But it was just a moment that my soul went, you pivot in a major way, and it's scary AF. But there's my soul was like, I don't see another way through this.
It's interesting when we look back on these things and we talk about the fact that you feel that fear and you get those external messages of, what are you doing? This is crazy. Why are you doing this? And no one understands it. But it sounds like you had this knowing that you were like, this is where I'm supposed to go. And for as much as, you were saying as luck would have it that you were enrolled in this program, I don't think that was luck. There was a reason.
It wasn't,
right?
It wasn't. It was divinely orchestrated. Absolutely. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I made a a meme once upon a time. I'm not the best with social media, but I did. I made a meme at one point, and I actually said it as luck would have it, and I crossed out luck and I said as the universe would have it.
So true, though. It's so true. It really is.
Yeah.
And would you say that more of the work that you did, even if we just start with that moment and you going through that training and looking at more of this embodiment practice and being able to be more in touch with yourself, like physically and emotionally, how has that shifted the way that you see the world?
It's a 180, a 360, whatever you want to call it. I'll actually tell you that story. So, because it's a really fascinating story.
Please.
And I think that this story is a gift to anybody that can catch it. So I was in the entertainment industry, and I had been a dancer my whole life. I grew up dancing. I even like part majored in dance all the way up through college. I've always been a movement person, an athlete, whatever you want to call it. And a friend of mine said, I want to take you to this female embodiment and empowerment class that I'm taking. And to boot, it was not just female embodiment and empowerment, but it was sensuality and sexuality based. And it was the introduction to pole dancing.
Oh, wow.
And I said, ooh, like I'm always down for a movement class, and I haven't tried a pole. So yes, I'm
different. Yeah.
Going.
Cool.
Totally going. And I'm going to preface this to everybody saying that this is an awakening story. So the way that I'm phrasing this now, I don't assign to it anymore. So know that. But so this is going to sound cringy right now, but I was going with my not sexy friend to this class. Okay. If anything, I felt like when we would go to the club, like I was the sexy friend, right? Mm-hmm. I say that knowing that I have not an ounce in me that would ever use verbiage like that now. But so we go to this class, and the class is different than any other like dance or movement class I've ever taken before. Typically a dance class, like it's bright lights and big mirrors, and you're encouraged to really be perfect in mimicking the choreography of the teacher. Mm-hmm. And this class was different. There were low lights, dim candles, no mirrors. And yes, the teacher would give you a movement, but it wasn't, very Simon Says, like follow exactly as I'm doing and be perfect in it. It was I encourage you to make this movement your own in a certain way. Like I encourage you to find what feels good in this movement for you, even if it doesn't look like what I'm doing. And so all of those things felt quite different. And I appreciated that. And I got to practice playing on a pole. And I remember being really frustrated because I wasn't very good at it at first. And
you
I
wanted to
nail it. Right. But anyway, at the end of the class, the teacher said, this is a class where existing students have brought their friends who have never experienced this before. Mm-hmm. So you people, we want you to sit down, and your friends that have brought you here and have been doing this for a little while are going to demonstrate what they've been up to in here and why they thought it was so great that they had to drag you to come to this class. And I'm like, oh boy, where are we going with this? And the teacher turns the lights down even lower, and she starts to put on some sort of really, deep, sensual song. And I would say maybe 5 to 10 seconds of that sound coming on and watching my friend start to move her body in a way that I had never seen anybody move their body. I was like, oh my God, not only is she my sexy friend, she's the sexiest thing I've ever seen on two legs. And how did I miss that? How did I buy into a lie that she was ever anything but? And if that's a lie, what else is a lie? I mean, my whole world went
literally in
a moment. Like it was almost like the Truman Show, like the dome shattered. And I was like, where are we? And like, what world have I been living in? And like, you know, the patriarchal glasses came off and I was just like, oh my God, I can see the truth now. And I knocked people out of the way to get to the front desk and sign up. Like, I'll have what she's having, you know? And that was the class that eventually led to me leaving the entertainment industry and going full force into the female empowerment sector. And this was before female empowerment was a hashtag. Do you know what I mean? This was 10 years ago.
It didn't have a name.
What's that?
It didn't have a name to it the way it does now.
It didn't. It was funny because for us, it was like we felt like we found like the female fight club. Like it was a very underground, like grassroots, you know, women in the dark in their 6-inch heels and you know, panties, just like fighting for their lives, you know.
I love that.
And I, you know, some of the greatest friendships of my life and like all of the permission to like find, you know, my inner heroine, if you will, like it really like sparked from that place. And at the same time, you know, I dove headfirst fully to that company. I mean, by the time I finished teacher training, I was immediately became the creative director of the company. I became a master teacher, master teacher trainer. I mean, and I was there for a decade at the red hot center of like leading this thing because I believed so wholeheartedly in it. But there was also a lot of dysfunction there. You know, for as scientifically, like for as much light is as much shadow as there's going to be. And so as much good as we were doing and as much beauty as there was in that space, there was also a lot of darkness and a lot of toxicity. And so it was really my time there being confronted with so much of the shadow values of wellness that we can all face, right? That I had another awakening of, you know, female empowerment should actually empower all the women. And that was not what was happening there. It was, you know, the mission of the company was to empower all women. And yet the women who were dedicating everything to it were really ultimately being disempowered. So that was another awakening for me of like, this work is so important in the world. And there's work to be done to get it to a place where it can really, truly deliver on the promise. And so that's really where I've been focused since leaving that company.
So where did that take you next? Did that immediately take you into saying, hey, I want to think about this a different way. I want to do this a different way, and I'm going to do it totally independently?
Absolutely. Well, what it took was a lot of training. I went and studied with every expert and all of the, like basically all of the holes that I saw. I was like, how do I fill those? Right? How do I need trauma informed care. I need somatics training. I need, you know, how to understand the trauma of the feminine generationally and individually and collectively as a culture. And I need to know how to dissolve, right? Not only discharge the energy of that, but like dissolve the root of it. And how do you truly create a collaborative environment when women are so conditioned to be competitive? There's so much to it. So I had to do my own healing, and then I had to learn how to help others heal. So there was a lot of that and a lot of working with experts and trying to figure out how to develop something that would truly serve. And also not just in the mental, emotional capacity, but physically, you know, women carry such shame and apology and fear in their feminine bodies for good reason. And I wanted to like bridge all of those worlds together. And so through the process of doing that, I did 3 things. One is I further developed my coaching practice, working one-on-one and in groups and in retreats with people, with women particularly. 2 was I developed a philosophy called the soul body paradox, which I trademarked, and it's the framework of everything that I believe in. And in a nutshell, it's this. What I have deduced through all of my research and all of my studying is we are, in a partnership, our soul and our body, right? Our soul chose this body to have an embodied experience through which we pursue our purpose and experience life, right? The soul is made of energy, right? I think everybody can agree that on some level, the soul is energetic, right? My studies say it's made of light. Everybody has their own, and to each their own, but energetic, right? And the body's matter. So we're talking energy and matter here. The soul is made of energy, which means energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It just changes form. We learn about energy in like the 2nd grade or something. And if something can never be destroyed and it only changes form, that means it's infinite, right? It goes on, it lasts forever. It's connected to everything. There is no beginning, no end. And because of that, it's certain, right?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Right. The body is the opposite. The body is uncertain, right? Because it has a very clear beginning and an end in time, meaning it has a lifespan, and space. I am separated from everything else by the nature of my boundary of my skin, right?
Right.
And the soul is like an angel and the body is like an animal, right? So there is this, I'm infinite, I'm connected to everything, I am totally certain. And the body is, I am finite, I am limited, I am uncertain. And like an animal, everything is a threat, right? Predator, prey, how alive, how do I not die? All of these things. So the soul is an acronym for source of unconditional love, right? The certainty, right? Like the mama that's just certain. And the body is like the child, I'm very uncertain. Can you keep me safe? Can you, whatever. And the bridge between those 2 things are your mind and your heart, right? They either connect these 2 worlds with like a very solid, sturdy, reliable bridge, or they disjoint you, right? So they're opposites. They're complementary opposites. The body is the number 1 feedback system for the soul. When you have dis-ease in your body, right? When your body is constantly giving you feedback, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm eating, processed food, I'm doing all of these things, right? I'm inflamed, I'm angry, I'm sad, whatever the body is giving you, it's feedback because it is your soul's GPS, right? And so your mind and your heart are there to go, okay, are we living into a belief system that isn't serving the complementary design of these 2 things, right? And so based off of that, number 2, the soul body paradox, I partnered with a fellow master teacher, one of my best girlfriends in the world as well. She's like a soul sister. And we created a company called the Soul Sway Practice. It took us 4 years to create. And it takes all of these worlds, the body, the mind, the heart, and the soul, and it merges them into one holistic practice that includes somatics, meditation, mindfulness, movement, nervous system regulation, like all embodiment, all of these things, sensuality and sexuality, there's a lane for that. But it all comes together in this practice, which is completely radical and not like anything else out there.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's not, because the entire time you've been explaining this, all I've been thinking to myself is how important it is to bring these things together, because I have always done a lot of these practices in isolation. And I never really found the one that I could connect to the most. Like, I think back to doing more of a traditional type of therapy practice, that your CBT type world. Never felt like I got what I was looking for out of that. Would try meditation, wouldn't stick to it for long enough. So never felt like I got what I was looking for out of that. And it hasn't been until recently that I've started to explore a practice that is more focused on what, some other people refer to as the inner child work and that sort of thing. And how you're describing it in terms of the relation between the soul and the body, it just makes so much more sense to me as I look back on the things that I'm deeming having not worked. It's because, like you said, there were a lot of holes. Yeah.
Holes and disconnections, right? It's like, if there's a flood in your attic, right? And you fix the flood in the attic, but you didn't deal with the fact that that flood also affected the wiring in the basement. Well, you've got to address the whole thing. Right? It's a ripple effect. One is inherently connected to the other. And if you change one thing, you're changing everything. But if you're not looking at how those changes affect everything else that's going on, then it's not a holistic practice, right? It's sort of like you're honking the horn, but the windshield wipers are going. Like you got to look at the whole thing, right? It's like, I don't just go to the dentist and not go to my internist or whatever, right? It's, you've got to look at the whole thing. And what if you got to go to the dentist and your internist at the same time? What a gift. Yeah. Right. So yeah, this practice is really radical and really unique in that way. There's really nothing quite like it. A lot of people have called it, the experience is like a natural microdose.
That's really cool. Yeah. And what are some other reactions that maybe for women who identified with what I said of having tried lots of different things and haven't really been able to piece it together, what sort of domino effect does that have for them in their lives in terms of the way they maybe make changes, operate differently, pick different career paths, whatever it can be? Because obviously when you start to do this work, you're opening yourself up to making these changes much in the way you have.
You are. And I'm not going to lie, this work, look, I've been doing this work for the better part of a decade, and I've taught celebrities, and I've taught Fortune 100 women, I've taught stay-at-home moms, around the world. And I have seen some pretty wild things. Not to say that like everybody has this, but I've seen women that have left their husband. I've seen women leave their husbands as a result. I have seen women leave their careers as a result. I have seen women like really transform their relationship with their physical health and their body, to get really healthy and get really strong in their body versus maybe, carrying some extra weight and not really feeding their body in ways that felt loving and nourishing. I have seen women get a lot more empowered and comfortable with their sexuality, whether that's going from being more of asexual to being more sexual, whether that's going from, being, I don't want to say hypersexual, but like using their sexuality as a weapon, right? Versus using their sexuality for intimacy and partnership and satiation and fulfillment. Women not carrying an apology in their shoulders when they're crossing the street, women dressing to feel really great about themselves, versus dressing to avoid attention that they don't want or to get attention that they feel like they're not going to get if they don't dress that way. Women feeling more empowered in, the masculine workplace, women feeling more aware of, wow, self-care is not only deserves a place on my daily schedule, but it is now just as necessary as brushing my teeth. For how much I used to dismiss it and how much I used to just, show up to please everybody and let them drink from my cup to the place that I was depleted. Women going, I'm going to keep my cup abundant and everybody can drink from the overflow, but not to the point where I'm completely and resentful and have nothing left to offer, so it's really all of it.
I'm just going to repeat what you said with the analogy about seeing self-care like brushing your teeth, because I know there are so many people out there who don't realize that, because I think so much of the messaging that we get as women is like what I said at the top of this episode, that there is this recognition that comes with from society of like, hey, you are a better mom, you're a better employee, you're a better this, fill in whatever role, because you put everyone else before yourself. And it's like, is that actually inherently true? Not if you end up feeling like shit in the process, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, when the world is holding all of these expectations of you, and you are not sustained to deliver those expectations, then how can anybody keep expecting them of you? It's like, would you go to work if you weren't getting paid? No, right? So why does everybody in, your personal life expect you to deliver and not get, reimbursed energetically speaking, sure. Right?
Well said.
It is considered a luxury. It's considered selfish. It's considered, the last priority on the list of importance. And yet at the end of the day, the cost is so high when we don't make it a priority, that I think we're at the point where, thank God, I think of a mainstream artery has been punctured, that people are starting to wake up and realize that this is a necessity.
Yeah. And you're right. Thank God. Like, because we can't just continue to keep operating this way. And by the way, my dog decided to join the podcast, so she's sitting in my lap. Right?
Oh, hi, baby.
But yeah, you're right. It really is bringing me to a bigger question for you on a more personal note of facing cancer diagnosis and cancer treatment. How has this practice for yourself, this inner work and this healing journey that you've been on up until this point, how do you feel like it's prepared you for that? Because of course, regardless of doing it all, it doesn't mean that we're completely eliminating fear, right? We have to go through all of the emotions. It's a part of the experience.
Look, I practice what I preach. Cancer was a wake-up call for me. And if I didn't have a deep, deep, deep relationship with my body, I wouldn't hear it. Right. So first of all, my body communicated to me very loudly that something was going on. Whereas a lot of women, the symptoms could be silent. Yeah. Right. You wouldn't necessarily be aware. But for me, I was hemorrhaging. So my body was being very loud and going, hey, there's something to address here. And I, advocated for it and got into the doctor as quick as I could. So, while I didn't catch it super early, I caught it early enough that I could say that, after treatments and just having my first PET scan being clean, like I'm hoping that this is in the rear view. Yeah. I'm declaring that it's in the rear view.
Yes.
So there's that. I can't say for sure that it's because I have such a developed relationship with my body that it was, really living out loud with its symptoms so clearly. But I'd like to think so. Also, anytime we have, I really believe this, disease in our body, dis-ease in our body, it is our body's way of communicating that something is out of alignment. And I went into a really deep dive into, okay, sweet body, like from the level of my soul all the way down, like from my soul to my skin. What is going on here? What is the lesson? And I got so many of them just by A, asking the question, and B, really deeply listening for my own answers, not what anybody else had to say. Right. And I remember, like, I'll give you an example of that. I was sitting in the car in a parking lot. My husband was going in to get my cold cap, which was to help me try to keep my hair during chemo. And I was looking at these trees that had these beautiful flowers growing from them as I'm sitting in the parking lot. And it was sort of like in this little garden area, like just a quiet, like private secret garden that I think if anybody was walking by, they'd miss it. You know, if I hadn't been sitting in that car, sitting still, letting somebody else take care of me and out the window and just taking my time for me, I would have missed that garden. And it was such a beautiful garden. And I just remember thinking to myself, what else do I need to do? Who else do I need to be? Where else do I need to go? What else do I need to accomplish that could be more fulfilling than this? Nothing. Nothing. It's just sitting here with this garden. It's enough. It's more than enough. And I'm grateful. I just feel so grateful to be here in this moment with this garden calling to me. And it may sound woo-woo to some people, but to me, it was a moment of pure presence, a moment of pure gratitude, and a moment of all the rest of it is bullshit. You know what I'm saying? And you get to slow down, because when you aren't slowing down and you're going a million miles an hour and you're doing a podcast and you're launching Soul Sway and you're raising the kids and you're doing it, right? You're missing it. You're missing it.
I didn't even share this with you, but of course it could come through based on the questions I'm asking. But what prompted me to go on this journey for myself at the start of this year was asking myself the question of, when is it going to be enough? So I really appreciate that you just mirrored that back. And before you even got to the word presence, when you mentioned noticing the garden, that was the first word that popped into my mind, because it's something that a lot of people struggle with, myself included. And it's like, sometimes you take a step back and you ask yourself, what are you doing all of this for? That doesn't mean that we can't have the hustle and the grind and the go, but it's like getting in touch with doing those things when the inspiration for it feels right and when it feels aligned. I'm now seeing that the work that I'm doing, the people I'm attracting to work with, are so much more fulfilling for me too, and for the impact that I want to be able to have, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is one of those things where when you get the lesson, when you let go and when you surrender, and you people, how do you surrender? Well, you know, there's not a 1, 2, 3 step process to that, but there is an idea of like letting go and letting God, like, you know, not closing your fist on something, but holding it with an open palm. You know, this idea of not surrender, like I'm waving the white flag and I give up, but like I let go of trying to arm wrestle the universe and micromanage the universe to like do it my way, when it's like, you'll never win that battle. You'll never win. So just show up and do the next best indicated action that is aligned with what feels most authentic, most true, most in the direction of what is fulfilling. That's all we can do. That's it. That's all we have control over. And that actually can bring you really present.
It can. And it can show up in literally every area. Like, for as much as we could sit here and say, like you just said, for some people, this may sound woo-woo. I can instantly give an example of how that's actually not woo-woo, in the sense that if you're somebody who's looking at making changes to your nutrition and on a pursuit of losing weight and looking to change the shape of your physique, the biggest question that I ask clients when they often feel like they're stuck or they're frustrated is, what's the best decision you can make in this exact moment with all the information that you have, with what you've learned so far from working with me? And let's talk through that. And I can help guide you on maybe that there is a better decision. That's the whole reason why you're coming to me with this, right? But sometimes there is such a challenge in being like, well, I want to get the right answer that's going to get me the results as fast as possible, when the right answer is you learning how to discern, like, what is that next best thing? And that can be a little bit uncomfortable for people too, which is okay, because it's a part of the process.
And what's even deeper than that is why. Why do you need those results as fast as possible? Because you're not lovable exactly as you are right in this moment? Because there's something better waiting for you than what exists in this moment right here and right now? Because like Byron Katie questions, like, is that true? Well, how do you know that that's true?
I love that.
How do you actually know that, you know, if you were to get the results that you're looking for, that it would be an improvement and that it's something, you know, awful wouldn't happen? It's like you're living in a fantasy that something better begets something better, but is it even something better? And is it something better that's coming as a result, right? And I think the thing that I found to be the most true with women in working with whatever the topic is, it actually doesn't even matter if they're working on health, if they're working on finance, if they're working on business, it's always the same, which is every fear, every stuck point that someone hits comes down to one thing. If you pull the thread, right, all the way back to like the knot at the very beginning, it's always, I am afraid that I will end up alone, in pain, without the resources to do anything to change it. And I'll be stuck there until I die. That's the root of any problem anybody's ever brought to me when we pull the thread. And it doesn't matter their age, it doesn't matter their background, it doesn't matter, you know, what they do for a living or what their family history is. That is the root of every fear. And what I find so fascinating about that, and you can tell I get really worked up and passionate about it, is we always have the resources to deal with anything that's given to us, as long as we don't judge the resource, right? It's about, well, if that happens, oh my God, a thumbs up. If that happens, I will have a nervous breakdown. Well, why are you judging the nervous breakdown? Right? Well, if that happens, I'll lose my job. Well, why are you judging that that's a bad thing? How do you know that that doesn't open the door to your best fucking life?
Yeah. Right.
And then on top of that, here's the real kicker. What most people are afraid of in that circumstance is how they will, the thing that worries them the most is how they will beat themselves up. Right? When they're alone with themselves after it's all said and done and the quote unquote worst has happened, how will they show up to themselves? You idiot, you dummy, you fatty, you this, you that, right? You loser. And how they're going to have to live with that abuse. And it's almost, I mean, here's another lyric, isn't it ironic? That the only person who's in charge of whether or not you experience that abuse or unconditional love is you. What if you promised yourself? What if you knew without a shadow of a doubt that no matter what happened, you were going to show up to yourself with open arms, a warm embrace that says, I love you. I'm so proud of you. Oh my God, you did your best. That's all that matters. We're going to figure this out. I've got you. We've got this. Don't worry about it. That's all it takes, is a shift in knowing that there is only one person that you've got to please, and it's yourself, and you can make a different choice. It's mind-blowing to me how abusive women are to themselves, myself included. No, none of us are immune to this, by the by.
Yeah.
But it's such a phenomenon, the way that we self-manage, right? Rather than self-advocate. It's a phenomenon. It's wild.
Ooh, self-manage versus self-advocate. That's a mic drop moment right there. I love that framing of that. And you're right. We're not immune to it. Even going through the process of becoming more aware of these things, the awareness piece I see as the most important step, because it is what will allow you to work on removing the judgment, to take the space to say to yourself, I love you. We can do this. It's going to be okay. But again, if you go back to this idea of what you were saying earlier of like, you're running around, you're doing the podcast, you're taking care of the kids, you're trying to grow your business. It's like, well, wait a second. Of course, you're running around with all this judgment attached to it because you're not even creating the space for yourself to look at this.
1000%, right? When you're trying to find the time in your schedule to like get your workout and your shower in, that's not living.
No,
that's not living. So again, we are the teacher and the student, all of us, all the time. But the beauty is that every single event gives us feedback and gives us an opportunity to grow. And if we look at it that way, rather than every event gives us an opportunity to beat ourselves up, or to push ourselves and bully our bodies and all of these things, then, things can change. Things can change.
Yeah. So beautifully said. And I think that's the perfect place for us to bring it all home and wrap this up. I typically end with a question that you may have already answered, but I'll still throw it in there to see if there's anything else you want to share. And that's if the listener could just take one little nugget, because you gave so many valuable pieces of advice and perspective throughout this entire thing. And I really appreciate you for that. What would be the one takeaway that you would hope someone would have from listening to this conversation?
That you're your own expert. Nobody else is your expert. And whatever you don't own in your expertise, someone or something else will.
So true, so powerful. Well, Alexis, thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Thank you for having me. This was such a fun conversation. I'm so glad you're doing this work in the world. It's so necessary. And you're such a bright, beautiful light.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing this information too, because, I think one other thing I want to say before you tell everybody where we can stay connected with you, because it'd be crazy not to follow you after listening to this, but I love the way you're highlighting the fact that this is work, right? And I think it's challenging sometimes when you look at what's going on social media with how the whole healing journey can be painted for people. It's not like my friend who I recorded about this with last week, Courtney, said it so well. It's not always going to be like the green juices and the walks and all these things. Like there's a grittiness to it. And that's the reality.
Absolutely. If anybody who thinks life is black and white is missing the rainbow.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us where we can stay connected with you, Instagram, all of your social media handles, which we will drop in the show notes. And of course, plug your podcast too, please.
Absolutely. Well, what's great about websites? My website is alexisartin.com, and you can get to all my socials through my website. So that's a great way to do it. And soulswaypractice.com is the greatest. I mean, I really think it's going to upend the landscape of self-care practices.
I'm so excited to watch more of it and get to experience it, because you, like I said, totally had my attention when you talked about bringing it all together.
Yeah. So anybody that spoke to, I encourage you to check it out. It is a game changer.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. And for everybody who tuned in today, thank you guys for being here. We appreciate you coming back week after week. And as always, from wherever you're listening from, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, Alexis.
Bye. Thank you.